funding is one of the biggest reason why most of the innovation fails. And so you need to, as founders, need to get creative around how do you fund your specific clinical validation study.
Welcome to this week's Startup Health Fireside Chat. Each week, we bring you candid conversations with the top minds in health innovation. We hold these sessions in front of a live audience of founders from the Startup Health portfolio. So there will be a lively Q&A as well as our interview. I'm Logan Plaster. It's my pleasure to get to host you for the next hour. Our esteemed guest today is Dr. Archana Dubey, the Chief Clinical Officer at AliveCor. Dr. Dubey is a family practice physician who has worked on the enterprise side at HP, but also in startups as a founder herself. AliveCor, as many of you know, has been a pioneer in the medtech device market for a decade, introducing the world's first single lead ECG that was built for consumers and built to integrate with mobile phones, with smartphones. Their latest offering, the Cardia 6L, is the first 6-lead ECG for consumers in this market. So safe to say they've learned a lot in 10 years of clinical validation, of consumer marketing, of tech integrations, and we're going to dig into all of that today. Welcome, Dr. Dubey, to this Startup Health Fireside Chat.
Hey, thank you, Logan. Nice to see everyone here, and looking forward to our conversation today.
Awesome. Dr. Dubey, you've had an interesting career spanning, like I said, family practice, startups, Stanford, HP, now AliveCor. As a way of getting to know you a little bit better, a little bit of background, I want to know, what was the spark that pushed you beyond traditional practice in medicine, made you want to try to build something new, something better in health?
I generally talk about my journeys through the P's in a way. So the P started with the patient. So I became a provider, which is the next P, a clinician to serve the patients through my personal life journey. And I worked, as you mentioned, through several academia, UC Davis, Stanford for a decade and a half. And I did a pivot to learn and get closer to payers, because that's the third of the trifecta, which is our patient, the provider, and the payer. Three of them share risk together on the health and outcome for individuals. And so I joined Google at the time, and then consulted for Tesla, and thereafter joined HP as the global medical director for a decade. And then learning more around the payer side of it. This is my third pivot, which is getting closer to product, which is the next P in my journey. And the reason, because expanding the impact. So as a provider, we touch one life at a time. As a payer, you touch many lives at a time. As a product, you touch millions of lives almost globally by making really good products. Why did I join AliveCor? Well, we saw, as a clinician, I've seen cardiology being the biggest burden on an individual, on a clinician, on a provider, to care for people with known cardiology conditions and also unknown cardiology conditions. We have a global epidemic around that. Every 1.69 seconds, somebody dies of heart disease. That's a staggering number to live with. And as a clinician, I was personally not okay with it, and hence, looked for solutions that were out there. During the pandemic, people who had cardiovascular illness did the worst. And so that was my biggest push, or a nudge in a way, to do something about it. So I joined AliveCor because they had the most advanced products in their solutions that are clinically validated and also FDA cleared. So I could take it to people.
What were your initial forays into health innovation like? So you said you realized that you wanted to have a greater impact than just one patient at a time, and you've had sort of an expansive career. So what were those first steps looking like?
During my career, I have been an early adopter. I would call it as an early adopter for technology, as an early adopter for selecting solutions that made sense for patients. So one of the examples is, some of the outpatient sleep apnea solutions. I was one of the first primary care providers who used to write on those. Also adopted a kit phenomenon in which we developed kits around asthma at Stanford, for example. Building corporate health solutions for corporations. That is an internal innovation that I did over at Stanford. So the Google stint was around that. So bringing care to people. And so just kind of expanding the boundary of the status quo and questioning those. And then aligning with people who also question that. And so some of the products that I have launched at HP, for example, are also kind of stretching the boundaries of the status quo of how medicine is done to how medicine should be done.
All right, let's talk about your role there at AliveCor, the Chief Clinical Officer. What's your primary objective at AliveCor?
Well, so as a Chief Clinical Officer, I lead the clinical products and strategy for AliveCor. AliveCor as a company has been building products, validating them, getting them through FDA's clearance for the last decade. Now we are ready to take a device and wrap it around with care. So we're moving from device to care. And we are also moving from an individual at a time to populations at a time. So we have been a direct-to-consumer company, and we have built products, and we are in process of building products and launching them very much so in 2022. That is going to be a business-to-business solution for people. And I'm actively participating on both sides.
Got it. You've been at the company for 9 months, so some of these challenges are still relatively new to you. What is the greatest clinical challenge that was placed in your lap that you're really wrestling with right now with the company?
What I would do is start with the history of AliveCor, and then kind of tie it into the current state. AliveCor has not taken things status quo. So 150-year-old technology, the ECG, and I would like all of us to imagine getting an ECG done at a doctor's office. You get this big old machine that is on a wheel that's brought it into the room. You have to take off your clothes, put on 12 sticky things on your body, and all these wires are coming at you. And somehow you're supposed to breathe just enough that you do not alter that ECG tracing. That 150-year-old technology is still used in doctors' offices doing your 12-lead ECG. AliveCor was not okay with it 10 years ago. And our founder, our inventor, our chief medical officer, Dr. Dave Albert, took 2 leads that could detect the most common arrhythmia and put it on one little ECG device, which is very similar to what you see behind me. That's a 6 lead. That's 6 times more powerful than the one that was developed, clinically validated, and FDA cleared 10 years ago to detect atrial fibrillation, which was the most common arrhythmia that causes stroke for individuals. So it was life-saving for people. It was disability-saving for people. And then 2 years ago, we made it 6 times stronger, and more to come in future. So when I joined AliveCor, I did not join naive. I actually joined as a believer. So as a provider, I have used and recommended Cardia as a device, Cardia Mobile as a device, as a clinician to my patients. And these were the patients that had some kind of arrhythmic event, some kind of a palpitation, and they had $1 million workup done with their cardiologist. They had all the access to the specialists they needed, the technology that they needed, but we still missed it. But then when I gave a simple device like Cardia Mobile in their hands, and they used it at the time of event, whether it's at after dinner or whether it's a friend's place, we were able to see the actual rhythm that they were experiencing. And there were not one, several of my patients were able to detect and save their lives by using a simple device like this. So we brought care in the home or in the lives of people through a simple device that breaks the brick and mortar boundaries of care that exist today. So that's why I came in as a believer. Yeah. And then once I joined, the clinical things, they're not problems. These are great opportunities for us to look forward to. It's a roadmap that we have built in not only the 6 rhythms that are FDA cleared today, but more to come in the next 2 to 3 years that you would be able to, just from a little credit card-like device, will be able to detect a lot many more things that are cardiovascular and attend to them a lot sooner. Our goal is to detect, manage, and hopefully reverse cardiovascular condition as it exists today.
Let's talk about that future vision then, because you've mentioned a couple things. You talked about moving from device to care, and then just now you talked about detecting and managing, where in the past, maybe at the very, very beginning, it really was just about gathering the data points, and there might not have been a comprehensive care concept. So here we are entering into 2022, and it kind of sounds like what you're saying is you're moving into a new evolution of the product from device to a whole system. So what is that approach? And just kind of paint us a picture.
As we all know, and most of us are from healthcare space, that device industry is important, but also is quite crowded, and has early devices and mid devices, very few mature devices that are FDA cleared at this time. But as a direct-to-consumer company, what we looked at is what we are a consumer-obsessed company. So we're totally obsessed with the patient, the consumer, or member, whatever word you want to use for that individual. And what we have heard from them is that they love our device and they want care. And especially during the pandemic, we noticed that their own care got disrupted. Their access to their cardiologist, whether they moved with their parents or they moved for other reasons, their own medical home got disrupted. And so having an added care to their offering was important to us. So in 2020, we did launch cardiac care as a solution that wraps care around our devices. Also, additionally, we know that 60% of our devices are being sold due to the recommendation of a clinician like me. And so we also looked at how, the need for a clinician in making decision is an important part. The patient doesn't go alone, they go along with their providers. And so not only that, today, a patient, a person, a member can use a device, but also request for doing a teleconsult with a cardiologist in certain states so that they're not left alone with just data. They can make sense and make it actionable with the help of our clinicians.
Quick question, Dr. Dubey, how big of a shift does that represent for the company? Since we're not sort of behind the curtain, is this a major evolution for what AliveCor represents, or just sort of a small change going forward?
It is a major evolution as we set the stage for serving our patients direct to consumer in a much more care-focused way, and through our care and subscriptions. It is a major evolution. And then as we have already moved into the business-to-business space, it is a strategic move for us to have care as part of our devices. So as we look at, we just launched our AliveCor labs for the clinicians, because the clinicians is the other part of the constituents for us. They can do today IDTF monitoring, which is continuous monitoring for their individuals to look for any arrhythmic events. And we already are partnering with several medical groups, including Allegheny Medical Group, for example.
You mentioned your obsession with consumers or users or patients. And it's something that makes AliveCor very unique is how long you've been a consumer-driven product. And you've made a splash at CES multiple times. And I wonder if you could speak to kind of how the device is different because you had that feedback loop. A lot of folks, a lot of founders avoid the direct-to-consumer route. It's complex, it's costly, and so it's just a different model. And so I wonder if you could just speak some to that, what's gained by that consumer feedback loop.
Absolutely. And as you must have seen, the theme of AliveCor is we do hard things. So we tackle the ECG, and we are tackling, of course, we are serving our direct-to-consumer space because it is hard. Because we need to delight our consumers. We need to be engaging for them. We need to be able to make data actionable for them to be able to come back to us. We have 104 plus million users of our technology who are consistently doing ECG readings for themselves, more than 120 million ECG readings that is coming through into our data set. So we have earned the credibility and trust for the consumers by being clinically validated, by being FDA cleared, and also being published through several, more than 160 peer-reviewed journals. And that is something that is a hard fate for any of the device or care company that has done. And if you look at in the last 5 years of ballooning digital health space, most of the solutions were built for either the employer or the payer.
You might not be able to answer this question, but I'm just kind of curious if you know of any ways that the product or the business model has shifted directly because of that consumer feedback. So because you have so many users, you have so much feedback coming back, are there ways that the AliveCor has shifted in tangible ways?
So there are two ways it has informed us. So we are an AI company. We learn from data and information. So the fact that we are able to engage people who are self-motivated enough to come in and buy a device out of their own money, buy cardiac care out of their own money, subscription out of their own money, we realize that we are serving that self-motivated population, but there is this whole population that is sitting under payers, under employers, that is maybe not as motivated or maybe have not become our customers. So we have been informed by the traction that we have in our direct to consumer to build our confidence to go into populations, because we can only expand our impact by engaging that population that is sitting under the payer employer space. So we are going there. We are at that, and then also we are also going towards the providers, because the providers are recommending us, but they would like to work with us so that they can recommend us to more of their populations. That allows us to now take some hard work to be done on reimbursement, for example. So AliveCor Labs is a reimbursed service. We had to do it as a business decision and do the hard work, because we do know that in order for us to engage that population that works with the providers, we needed to be reimbursable. And so hence we did that in this 2021. And of course, going closer to the employer and payer in 2022.
We could talk for a little bit about clinical validation as it applies in your mind to the startups on this call or anybody watching this in the future. I wonder what your advice is for a startup thinking about the first steps towards clinical validation. Kind of what should they be emphasizing? What should they be prioritizing?
First and foremost, for most of the startups and founders, is really important to know that are you really solving a pain point? Are you solving a problem for a patient or a provider? These are the two main constituents that you have. And if you are, is your solution adding value or adding cost to the system? And if you have already passed that, then looking at your solution and creating clinical validation pathways for yourself, partnering with academia or leading institutes to do your clinical validation is important. you want to be able to validate your solution against the current standard of care. So we validated, for example, our ECG devices against the 12-lead ECG, which is the gold standard for most of the clinicians. And if it measures up to the accuracy, the sensitivity, specificity, and level, then you need to replicate it. We need to continue to replicate it in different unbiased populations. And so you need diverse populations. You would need real world data and hopefully prospective, if not retrospective, to kind of work with you. And then looking at maybe going into pre-submission with the FDA with your solution. Generally, FDA, most people are fearful of, but generally FDA is on your side. So they will allow you and they will direct you to really make your product robust for clinical needs and clinical usage. And so when you do the pre-sub, they will give you homework to do, and that homework becomes really important for you to start paying attention to. And then hopefully you'll be ready for your FDA clearance.
Just to get really practical, obviously all of that clinical validation would be great, but sometimes it's a budget and time issue, and you have to decide, okay, how much clinical validation will get me to the next step. And so I wonder, what are your thoughts on when you're really early, how do you take that next move to, just validate the next step and the next step and the next step? Is there a stair-step approach? How do you think through that for a startup?
Generally funding is one of the biggest reason why most of the innovation fails. And so you need to, as founders, need to get creative around how do you fund your specific clinical validation study. And generally, like I mentioned, partnering with an academic center would be good, or a not-for-profit organization. You could look into like Gates Foundation, for example, if this is an area that you're trying to solve that is of concern. Or you could look into partnering with populations that are already suffering from that and working with their clinicians. So the clinical validation study could be even 3 primary care physicians who are having, I'm going to pick Mark's solution on pain management. And they could have a pain management practice that they could recruit X number of people. And that could be a smaller cost, lower cost study that you could start with. And once you see stellar results, then you could go to academia, for example. And then once the academia is bought in, they themselves do fundraising, and they have funding cycles ready. So that's another way for you to start the process if you want to start small. Personally, I would start with my clinician friends and get to a cohort of population to start validating my product first.
That's the kind of practical advice that I was looking for. You do have to start sometimes within your closest circle of influence, right?
Yes.
You mentioned Amrin, your partnership with them, and something interesting about AliveCor is how many organizations and devices you've integrated with. Your integrations and your partnerships, you've woven yourself into CROs, Apple Watch, all these things integrate and can interplay with AliveCor. And so I wonder if we could talk a little bit about kind of what makes a successful partnership. A lot of folks on this call want to sort of be embedded into another system and to have that interplay work well. So what are some of your words of wisdom about what makes a strong clinical partnership like that?
Yes, absolutely. So AliveCor has been intentional about not being in a data silo. We are all about, if we really want to impact cardiovascular space, we need to be able to be data portable and work with all of the constituents to be able to solve for cardiovascular disease. And so all of the founders, as you're building your solution, have the integration strategy be part of your differentiator and success story. So I would say our integration through API, SDK, and also presence on Epic, App Orchard, is one of the ways that we have allowed our technology to flow into the hands of both the patients and their clinicians. Me as a clinician, I live in my universe of electronic health record. If that ECG doesn't show up there, it does not become part of my workflow. And so always thinking like, how do you put your technology to become part of the workflow of whoever you're serving is an important part. And integration is an important aspect of that. Because of our integration, we were able to quickly scale into the CRO because we had the APIs, SDK integration. Even when pandemic was disrupting all and every aspect of patient touch points, we were able to scale our touch points because of our integrations. One of the examples is, our QT measurements that, people who are on cancer therapies, they need to do QT measurements. They need to go find a doctor's office to do a 12-lead ECG. The devices are mailed today to them because the patients who have cancer, who are on chemotherapy or other medications that's lowering their immunity, they don't need to be going to doctor's office in the middle of a pandemic and to affect their health. And so our technology quickly scaled because of the integration into the biopharma universe in a way. Some of our work that we have done at Cedars-Sinai is through our integration through the Epic. So a Cardia Pro is where all of our ECG goes for a clinician to be able to review. That Cardia Pro portal is now available inside an Epic, Epic being the predominant electronic health record of our times. So now a clinician at Cedars-Sinai can review all of the data around the ECGs that come through them.
Can I ask you a little bit more about your partnerships in CROs? Mm-hmm. It's just interesting to sort of see how AliveCor is evolving from the device to really powering other things. And I wonder if you could speak to sort of how AliveCor has the potential of changing how we think about clinical trials. How is AliveCor integrating with, let's say, decentralized clinical trials?
So currently, there are two major players in the decentralized clinical trials where they enroll patients. And so Medable and ERT are the two major players in that space. And when the clinical research organizations or the research started getting disrupted, we were quick to make that partnership so that when Medable and ERT is recruiting people for a clinical trial, IRB recruitment digitally, they have the kit that arrives to them, so they're able to gather the ECG level data that is required for whether it's a drug or a treatment intervention, whatever it is that a clinician or biopharma is reviewing and studying.
And how do you see that changing over time? I mean, it's such a dynamic industry.
Well, I would say in the CRO space, the cat is outside the bag now. And the reason why I say it is that the brick and mortar research is also becoming obsolete because people movement is a reality. And then also access to a larger population, a diverse population is important for any research. And so now when you have made research more digitized, just like our Zoom call today, nobody knows where everybody's sitting right now, but we are all here right now. In the same exact way, if I would like to research on a drug, I don't need to go work with Stanford, which is my proximity, but I could work with all over US to get a diverse population and recruit patients IRB. And from the patient side, imagine if you are a person who has failed all therapy and you're really looking for clinical trials that has that experimental drug that you would like to explore to either save your life or improve your life, you would want to sign up for that. But you're sitting in Minnesota. and the study is happening at Stanford. What do you do? That ability to really make it remote, and our ability to work with CRO organizations like Medable and ERT enables that for that individual.
That's so huge. Is sticking on this topic of successful partnerships is a little bit longer. I wonder if you could speak to really kind of the mindset of the partner that you're looking for, kind of the priorities that they need to have to really be a good fit for AliveCor, and by extension, kind of wisdom for partnerships for folks in this call, what they need to be prioritizing, whether it's a double bottom line, just how you sort of think through the mindset of the partner.
One of the examples is when we partner with organizations, especially either centers of excellence or academic organizations, we look for pioneers and also folks who are leading the change for cardiovascular space. So we have partnered with Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic. And Cleveland Clinic has actually published more of the clinical validation studies for us using our device than any other organization. And we are thankful for that. But they are a leading organization in cardiovascular space. And that same thing with Mayo Clinic is that they are a leading organization also in a cardiovascular space, and they worked closely with our QT prolongation clinical validation. So they do see value in it. They have a large number of population that they can recruit through their clinical validation study. They've also worked with us being able to use ECG as a method to detect some blood chemistry changes without doing a blood test, for example. So those are a couple of partnerships that I could share, how we are being a little bit more strategic and intentional around our partnerships, because we want to partner with people who are leading the change in the cardiovascular space.
Just shifting gears a little bit, I'm just thinking about sort of the practical challenges faced by folks on the call, and certainly the chat is open to any questions people want to leave. We're talking about clinical validation. You're a chief clinical officer. Oftentimes a startup, they may or may not have someone on staff that really has your expertise, a chief clinical officer to really lead that charge. And yet you've been on both sides of the equation as a founder and working at a enterprise company. I wonder if you have any advice for the startup that it doesn't have a Dr. Dubey on staff, and sort of building the team and sort of thinking through how do we accomplish some of these things?
I would say if you're not part of an organization that is a group of entrepreneurs, like Startup Health, I would say, a plug-in for you. But also at Stanford, we have StartX, for example. We have these organizations that are kind of incubators. There's a lot of access to academic thought leaders and physicians who are thought leaders in this space that you could approach and identify the areas that you need help, from use cases as a subject matter expert, as how do I apply this technology to make people's life better? How do I go about clinical validation? All of these things can be tapped through a part-time, a consulting, and other mechanisms that you could do by really talking to thought leaders in that space. A lot of my colleagues and clinicians are open to that kind of conversation. I'm happy to share a few other forums. I personally have Invent Health platform that I founded, and that's where Startup Health and myself have had crossroads where we met actually. So in Invent Health, we bring in investors and innovators and early and adopters, whether it's Kaiser's or Stanford's or whatever, to really help create the bridge between funding, innovation, and adoption. Because those bridges are necessary for us to do. And we do have a lot of clinicians who are interested in helping organizations to be successful.
I didn't intend for that question to be a setup for a plug for Startup Health, but a genuine one at that. So I'm glad everyone is here and in a cohort of folks and Slack channel that people can ask for help on. I want you to take out your crystal ball and take an opportunity to sort of think about 2022. It's a bit of a mouthful, and beyond. And you mentioned some of the ways the company's evolving, but maybe you could speak to where you see opportunities in health tech more generally, and some of the themes that you're most excited about that might intersect some of the folks on this call.
Absolutely. I do feel digital health, as much as it's looking like it's booming, it's the infancy at this point. It's the version 1.0 that we are seeing. All of the solutions, all of the founders, whoever are here today, no matter what the maturity of your solution is, if you're serving the patient, you got to get to the providers and the payers. If you're serving the providers, you got to get to the patients and the payers. If you're serving the payers, you got to get to the other two. So it's important for you to know that how you scale your solution from whoever you're serving to all of the 3 Ps is an important aspect that you need to make as part of your 2-year, 4-year, 5-year strategy, whatever that you would like to do. For AliveCor, for example, in 2022, we are going in big into the business to business model. So we are focused on bringing our solution to our providers, our clinicians, through our AliveCor labs. We are going to be launching, so look out for that big announcement coming up early next year, into the payer employer space. And we are also expanding our biopharma solutions. While we're doing it, our direct-to-consumer will also expand and enrich their device and care solutions. So more of the care subscriptions will be coming through the horizon. So these are on the horizon. We have exciting products that are soon to be released that I'm unable to share today, but we should be able to share very soon.
Awesome. We got a question in the chat from Satya Lumalai from Adar Health. Satya, why don't you come off of mute, explain what you do briefly, and ask your question.
Hi, Logan. Thanks for bringing me in. Thank you so much, Dr. Dubey, for your great feedback. Satya, I'm the founder and CEO of Adar Health. It's a digital medicine company. As a part of our solution, we built a single integrated device that measures more than 10 vital health parameters in just 30 seconds. We're FDA cleared, CE mark approved. We always look up to AliveCor as a great competitor and also somebody who's look at it as a companion to whatever we are doing, and also our device as a great companion. From our perspective, I would really like to understand in terms of beyond ECG, what are some of the things that physiological parameters that you're really looking into that could add value to both your decentralized clinical trial related efforts and also in terms of chronic disease management?
Thank you, Satya, for asking that question. And maybe we should have an offline conversation on that. But, we look at cardiovascular, as you have seen, not just from the lens of only cardiovascular. We look at cardiovascular from the lens of all specialties. I'll share an example of working with substance abuse centers in which our devices are screening for QT prolongation for people who are getting treated for substance abuse, for example. So we do see psychiatry as our space that we would help to serve. So in that context, we're looking at all signals from the body become important because the heart doesn't sit outside the body, it sits inside the body. Just as you know, when we have fever, our heart rate goes up. So the temperature is an important attribute. Our devices are able to see signals from the heart, and hence we partnered with Amron to be able to see the signals from the arteries. And so I would be happy to hear from you what all signals you're working on. And so maybe there could be a possibility of partnership. And a healthy competition is something that AliveCor always welcomes because there's so much to be done in this space, and there's not enough of us. And so really, if there's anybody building technology that is actively solving for cardiovascular space, kudos to them.
No, I think that's phenomenal because for us, like what AliveCor has done for ECG is way ahead, light years ahead of some of the other companies that are there. And it's always been, I mean, I still remember the first YouTube video that was published by, I think your CTO, I believe, or one of the founders, right? So
It's become a famous YouTube video now.
absolutely.
Yes.
No, for us, it's, I think we are, every time when we really talk to other organizations, they always bring about AliveCor as like, hey, we're already working with them. So for us, it's, we always look into companies who can actually augment our solution, add value, but at the same time, as you said, we measure cardiopulmonary parameters, mostly from the heart rate, lung functions, and other things, which would be a phenomenal value add to all the efforts that you're taking. But thanks for all the great feedback.
Yes, absolutely, Satya, and I'm happy to talk to you in
Yeah.
another venue.
Awesome.
We'll make sure. Thanks, Satya. We'll make sure we make those connections, and anybody else who would like to have a connection afterwards as well. You know, when AliveCor started, there was fewer signals, less noise, and now when you think about health tech data, there is a lot of noise. And so, as sort of a, you know, as we're getting towards the top of the hour, how is AliveCor thinking about this idea that more data isn't necessarily better? It's what you do with it. It's how you become actionable with it. So how are you thinking about sort of the big data side of the next evolution of AliveCor?
Absolutely. So data is important to us. More is better, by the way, for our AI, for AliveCor. But for our partners, whether it's patients, providers, or payers, actionable data is what matters. So hence, through our AI, we have been able to do determinations that our device itself can read what condition or what ECG is coming through. So that is one mechanism in which we have taken the data and created intelligent sense around it. So it's the device itself is giving actionable diagnostic information in the hands of a clinician. Because we are a quadruple aim company, as we talked about. Quadruple aim, if our founders do not know, the 4 aims that everybody needs to march towards. 3 are patient facing and 1 is clinician facing. So the experience is delighting your patient is important. So the experience is important, having a high quality experience. Care outcome, improving care outcome is important. Decreasing the cost of care is important. And then also reducing physician burnout and delighting the physician is important. These are 4 quadruple aims, or the quadruple aims that we hold close to us. So how do we kind of be truthful to it is by making the data actionable for the patient and then for the provider by using our AI to give the determination and diagnostic ability to our device itself. It's not that the clinician doesn't have access to it. They can always have an override power on it. But we have seen with our validation that we are pretty accurate in making that determination and removing the noise and making it much more actionable.
We're getting close to the top of the hour. Something we always do is give folks a chance to reflect back their greatest insights, something they've taken from the session, sort of as a way to thank our guests and to just reiterate what we've learned. I got a note in the chat. Satya, you said you have an insight, so go ahead and share.
I think having worked in a medical device industry, having gone through this for a couple of years, I think AliveCor kind of gave us a path where like you can get into different verticals as long as you can be good at what you're doing, right? So I think when it was only thought as like a consumer-oriented device where you check and then not care about it, today you guys help companies like us to really talk to investors and others to also show value that a device can play a role in direct-to-consumer model, help patients, but also help physicians to better manage their patients. And last year, through partnerships and through some of the major activities for decentralized clinical trials, now we as a company or any other company in this space can actually go out there and say, hey, we can take care of multiple businesses, because at the end of the day, our ultimate value is like taking care of patients and providing them with the insights that is timely and more accurate and reliable. So for us, I think all what you discussed was very exciting to us, or any other company which is focused on device-enabled interventions. So thanks to great insights, and more importantly, we're really looking forward to finding more exciting partnerships.
Dr. Dubey, I'm going to give you the final word. Any final words of advice to the people on this call, particularly as your experience as a family practice physician and helping them connect with the just the life and pain points of a practicing physician and making sure that's incorporated? What are your final thoughts for people on the call?
Yes, one of the important things for all of us to consider is to know your user, do your user research. And it's an important aspect of building any kind of solution, especially how you interface it with your user. So if you're serving the patient, get to know their patient stories and understand what the member journey or the patient journey needs to look like. As a clinician, I would say that there's so many products that are out there that were built in a lab that never thought that there's a patient who's going to be using it. So accessibility, ability to read, bigger fonts, and in all of those things. Know your user is an important aspect. So if you don't have a user research team, partnering with one that is effective is an important part of building your product. So solution is that makes sense for your patient is an important part of your user research.
I love it. Dr. Dubey, that takes us to the top of the hour. I think I speak for everyone when I say thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule. Share with us what AliveCor's is working on, the evolution of that very interesting and inspiring device as it moves from device to a whole wraparound care platform, and really it takes part in this whole telemedicine revolution. It's very interesting, exciting. See how it's going to power decentralized clinical trials. So thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
Thank you, Logan, and good luck to all the founders here.
Thanks for listening to Startup Health Now. Startup Health invests in health transformers from around the world who are committed to achieving audacious health moonshots. If you want to learn how you can join this community of entrepreneurs, or if you want to connect with one of our 380 companies, go to startuphealth.com. If you'd like to learn how you can invest in our Health Moonshot Impact Fund in collaboration with AngelList, go to healthmoonshots.com. Thanks for listening to Startup Health Now. We'll be back next week.